Report story. By Wing Song Halo. Sometimes, it's no good deed went unpunished. This was turning out to be the case for Izuku Midoriya ever since the class's trip to the beach last week. He still wasn't very clear on how frolicking in the sand and surf was going to help their development as heroes, but everyone seemed to be having so much fun that he couldn't bring himself to mind. It had been fairly uneventful, unless you counted the usual antics that ensued whenever swimsuits and teenagers were involved. Izuku himself tended to burn easily if he stayed in direct sunlight for too long, so he spent most of the time just hanging out in the shade near the boardwalk. He was perfectly content to just do the homework he'd brought with him, chat with his classmates once in a while, and listen to the sound of the ocean. Unfortunately, things hardly ever stayed so peaceful for long. Hey, what's going on out there? Is that Uraraka? Kirishima piped up from where he was getting a drink from the vending machine near Izuku's study spot. The green-haired boy's head whipped up at the sound of his friend's name, and he followed Kirishima's gaze to see Uraraka bobbing in the choppy water, separated from his other classmates and waving her arm. He was in the water before 5 seconds had gone by, his body crackling with full cowling. She thrashed and kicked when he took hold of her arms, which was understandable since that was the typical thing people did when they were drowning and panicking. But what worried Izuku was when she went limp, her head lolling in exhaustion. The water crashed around them, and only then did Izuku notice that the ocean was trying to pull them away from the shore, lapping over them relentlessly over and over, a rip current. Water rushed up around his chest and splashed up to his mouth, and he lifted his chin and held his breath. He held Uraraka as high as he could, his heart pounding as memories of green sludge seeping into his lungs and suffocating him flashed through his mind. But he wasn't helpless like that anymore. He let the power of One for All fill his body again, gritting his teeth as he forced the water to release its hold and kicking furiously to get them back to shore. They rocketed through the water like a speedboat. The muscles of his legs burned, and his chest ached with the exertion from holding his breath. Distantly, he registered the confused and anxious shouts of his classmates, but right now he was only concerned with getting Uraraka to safety. He gasped deep, desperate lungfuls of air when he reached the shore, as if making up for all the breaths he had been unable to take when the water was surrounding him. His t-shirt was dripping, the fabric clinging to him uncomfortably. Laying Uraraka gently on the sand, he brushed her drenched chestnut hair away from where it was plastered across her forehead and cheek. She was almost as white as her swimsuit, her usually rosy cheeks pale. When he turned her face to let water drain from her nose, her head flopped to the side lifelessly. He couldn't feel any air coming from her mouth or nose when he centered it again, and her chest wasn't rising or falling. His heart rate sped up again, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Something like terror raced down his spine like an icy hand. Though the shadows of the other members of Class 2A fell over the two of them, Izuku's focus had no room for anyone but Uraraka. He didn't think twice about what he did next. CPR wasn't something he'd ever performed in real life, but he knew the theory well enough. He tilted Uraraka's chin up, pinched her nose, and delivered rescue breathing. He had to give 5 puffs of air, one after the other, just as the training had taught him. "Oh my God, is she okay?" Ashido's anxious voice said from somewhere to the rear of them. "Of course she's not," Kaminari hissed. "Just look at her. Promoted stories. You'll also like. Free. Onishots 150K3K. This is a collections of free X readers. Requests on this are now closed. The Kings and Queen Yandere Wakfu X Reader 59.9K 1.8 Kyonder. Wakfu X Reader. Images do not belong to me unless stated. Wakfu does not belong to me, it belongs to Enigma. This is being rewritten in another book on my profile. Feelings. Izuocha. X Reader 57.4K 1.3K RE posting. This until I edit it, sorry if it's not good, it's my first time writing a story. You enroll at UA and you have multiple quirks you are really good at using, why? Her prince from the underworld, half demon is. 0.26.3K 462. It's basically the same story as my succubus Momo X Deku story. I know, real original, but hey, now you guys get a Deku from the other side of the tracks. Return of Mokuden discontinued 3.6K 45. This story is officially up for adoption. If anyone is interested, message me or comment on the story. Much needed love, Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu, 52.6K 834. After Wattpad had decided to delete this story out of nowhere, I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have 8.43.2K 1.4 kilo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmik. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 Radio. Shut up. Guys. Juro interjected. Back off and give them some space. Before he could even finish giving the fourth breath, Uraraka's face twitched. His gaze moved over her, taking in every movement as her eyes fluttered open halfway. You're okay, Izuku murmured as he held her cheek, not knowing if he was talking to himself or Uraraka. Then his friend's face twisted in discomfort, and Izuku sat up to allow her to curl over to her side and cough the water from her lungs. Her breaths were ragged, her shoulders trembling, but as she propped herself up on one elbow and groaned, Izuku felt a rush of overwhelming relief. She was alive. He clenched his hands into fists to stop their shaking. A light-headed feeling swept through him, and he sat back on his heels, suddenly feeling as if a light breeze could blow him over. Everyone back up, Aizawa barked, shouldering through the ring of concerned onlookers. I leave you kids alone for 5 minutes. What in the world was that useless lifeguard doing? Izuku hauled himself to his feet, his knees wobbling as they barely supported his weight, and stepped back to allow their teacher to kneel down and examine Uraraka. When she was pulled to a sitting position and wrapped tightly in a towel, Izuku couldn't help noting how small it made her look. She didn't look like the strong, independent Uraraka he knew. She looked vulnerable, even helpless. Izuku decided he really didn't like seeing her like this. Well, we were lucky, Aizawa informed them when she'd been checked over. There wasn't much water for her to dispel. I don't know what happened. Uraraka's voice was hoarse, quiet, and her eyes were a little glazed. She was staring at the clumps of sand between her toes, but it didn't look like she was really seeing it. I'm good at swimming, but the water suddenly dragged me away from everyone. Rip currents are very dangerous, Aizawa told her, and perhaps it was Izuku's imagination, but he thought the words directed towards Uraraka were more gentle than usual. Even strong swimmers get caught up in them. He turned his attention to the rest of the class. No one else is going swimming today, needless to say. Some of the students made noises of disappointment, but most of them nodded solemnly. The thick tension that hung in the air still hadn't entirely dispersed. "Well, what are you all still standing around for?" he prompted them then. "Stop crowding her. Asui, please take Uraraka to the first aid area to get changed into dry clothes." The frog girl nodded and stepped forward, helping Uraraka to her feet as the rest of the class separated into groups. Izuku watched as Asui, no, Suyu-chan, and Uraraka made their way up to the boardwalk slowly. "Your quick thinking may have saved Uraraka-kun's life," Iida said, clapping a hand on Izuku's shoulder. It was probably supposed to be a gesture of reassurance, but instead it felt kind of like a karate chop. He stumbled slightly at the force, stifling an oof. I just did what we've been trained to do," he said. "Anyone else could have done it." "Nonsense. You've done something commendable and you should be acknowledged for it," his taller friend insisted. Insisted. He turned to their teacher, who was watching Uraraka's progress as well. "Isn't that right, Aizawa-sensei?" "Well, to be honest," said Aizawa, hunching his shoulders and sticking his hands in his pockets, because even at the beach he dressed like a shabby ninja, she would have been fine without the rescue breathing. Izuku and Iida stared. "Huh," Izuku squeaked. "She simply needed her airway cleared," Aizawa clarified. "However, you performed the procedure exactly as you were instructed, so your actions are indeed worthy of praise." He shuffled up to them and patted Izuku's mess of wet curly hair once. "Nice work." From Aizawa, this was indeed exultant praise. Thank you, sir," he replied as their teacher wandered off to round up the other kids. "Did I hear that correctly?" Ashido asked from behind them, and Izuku jumped as he whirled to face her. She was wearing a purple bikini that exposed a lot of rosy pink skin and which made him uncomfortable to look at, so he fixed his eyes 3 inches from her left shoulder instead. Uraraka didn't actually need rescue breathing. Said Izuku, feeling sheepish. That would seem to be the case, yes. She grinned wider than Izuku thought appropriate, given that one of her classmates had just nearly drowned. Her gold eyes gleamed, so there was no reason for you to kiss her like her life depended on it. His mouth dropped open. WH. WH. I mean, I get it, said Ashido, holding up her hands. Uraraka's a cutie, but isn't it a little crass to kiss her if she's unconscious? I. I wasn't. Izuku's mouth opened and closed like the drawbridge of a very stupid castle. His cheeks felt like two miniature suns. How dare you? Iida interjected, his hands sawing the air in agitation. Midoriya-kun was merely doing his duty as a hero and a friend. He had no ulterior motives. Izuku shot a grateful glance at him, since his mouth still wasn't working properly. "I've got to agree with Mina," Jiro put in, coming up behind her pink classmate. Her swimsuit was more modest. A black one-piece, plain but flattering, so she wasn't quite as hard to look at. She rested one hand on her hip, twirling one of her earlobes around a finger with the other. "You should probably apologize to her for stealing her first kiss." BBI. His mouth was working about as well as the Tin Man's before Dorothy had found the oil can. Her first kiss, stolen by him. That was ridiculous. Mouth to mouth was nothing like kissing. Well, it was a little like kissing, if you called it mouth to mouth, but the objective was definitely different. I thought it was sweet. Hagakuri's voice chirped, her pink halter top two-piece bouncing over to them. It reminded me of Sleeping Beauty. Except instead of a dragon, Midoriya fought the whole ocean to save his princess. Don't tease him like that. Guys, Ojiro scolded them from a short distance away. Midoriya, you did the right thing. They're just giving you a hard time to lighten the mood since everyone was kinda scared for a while there. Izuku just nodded dumbly as the three girls cracked up. Ochako found herself wondering if everyone could somehow read her mind. Last week at the beach, she'd nearly drowned. That had sucked. Needless to say, Deku had pulled her to shore and saved her, because of course he had since he was Deku. Her memory of the incident was a blur of panic and desperation. If she hadn't been so freaked out by the water sweeping her away, maybe she would have done the intelligent thing and levitated herself out of the water. But alas, her mind had only been a chaotic rush of oh my god, the ocean is trying to kill me and am I really going to die in a roughly bikini? The first thing she recalled after losing consciousness was being wrapped up in a towel, suddenly able to feel the warmth on her skin again. When she had recovered, she thanked Deku profusely for rescuing her, and he had turned red and told her not to worry about it. That didn't seem out of the ordinary, really. What was out of the ordinary was that every time she teetered on the border between sleep and wakefulness since then, she found herself thinking of him leaning over her, looking down at her in concern as he held her cheek gently, and kissing her awake. Maybe most girls would enjoy the recurring dream of the person they sort of maybe perhaps had the tiniest little itty bitty bit of a giant crush on kissing them. But for Ochako, it just felt like another reminder that she let herself get distracted too often. She tried a number of methods in first year to curb the feelings, snapping a rubber band on her wrist that had ended up getting suspicious since she snapped it constantly whenever she talked to him, imagining him as a potato whenever he popped up in her thoughts, that had led to her just craving potatoes all month, even avoiding him, that had been unbearable after only 2 days. The heartbroken look on his face when she turned away from him and walked off without a word shattered her resolve nigh instantly. No matter how often she mentally told her feelings for him to take a hike and get out of there, they lingered around, sprawled across a mental sofa and refusing to leave the mental house while they just grew and grew. Still, though, she hadn't ever had indulgent dreams like this. Maybe once or twice she'd idly entertained the idea of what it would be like to kiss him, but she never got very far in imagining it, because she'd remember his fierce, single-minded determination to become a hero and instantly feel ashamed of herself for getting lost in something as juvenile as high school romance. Why couldn't she dedicate herself to her dream the same way he did? Did she just not want it as badly? Or, and this was a scary thought, was she so weak that she wanted another person more than she wanted to be a hero? And so she pushed aside these thoughts whenever they occurred. She did not pay any mind to the fluttering of her heart when he smiled at her. She ignored the butterflies in her stomach whenever they brushed hands. She fought the floaty feelings that could rival the effects of her quirk whenever he praised her. Rather than beating against her chest like a caged bird, her heart merely ruffled its feathers a little when he was near, and if she really concentrated, she could turn those butterflies in her stomach back into caterpillars that just sort of wriggled around and made her vaguely uncomfortable. She was a pro at dealing with this whole burying her feelings thing by now, and these dreams were totally screwing that up. The worst part was that she didn't really want the dreams to go away, if she was being honest with herself. It was probably the closest she would ever come to actually kissing him. Maybe, a part of her tried to convince herself, if she had these dreams, she wouldn't crave the real thing. No, that was stupid. So very, very stupid. Despite how persistent and consuming they were, Ochako had always thought herself to be rather good at concealing her feelings for him. Sure, people had occasionally figured it out. Aoyama had been the first, but eventually nearly all the girls in her class had caught on. But even then she just carried on as usual until everyone seemed to forget about it. Maybe one day even she would forget about it if Deku would ever stop being so damn likable. That was. She had been keeping a lid on her feelings for as long as she'd known what they were. She had never outright confessed them to anyone, and she was almost positive that the boys in her class didn't have a clue. They rarely had a clue about anything. So why was it that now, everyone seemed to be murmuring to each other with secret smiles when she and Deku sat together or ate together? Why had she once caught Kaminari making a kissy face at them when they walked by? Why would Mina's eyes dart between Ochako and Deku before she shot Ochako a mischievous wink? She didn't know how, but her classmates suddenly all seemed to know that she was head over heels for her best friend, and they were making sure she knew they knew. These days she found herself looking around to check if anyone had seen whenever she accidentally let her gaze linger a little too long on him, or deliberately sitting on Ida's other side at lunch instead of having Deku in the middle like usual. Her tall friend made a very effective wall. But still, everyone looked at her like they knew exactly who she wanted beside her, who she dreamed of every night. When the bell rang Friday morning, Ochako ducked her head, avoiding Jiro's knowing smirk as she returned to her seat after bidding Deku a rushed goodbye. Dash dot. It had been about a week, and Izuku was getting a little frustrated with his classmates. He knew they meant well. They would never do anything to hurt him on purpose well, aside from Kachan, who even now in second year took a little too much delight in hurting him when the opportunity presented itself, and their jokes were mostly harmless. But he couldn't help but feel mortified during instances like Mondays, when Kaminari had glibly asked, "Where's Sleeping Beauty? Does she need a princess kiss again?" When Uraraka hadn't arrived in homeroom yet. Or Tuesday, when Ciro had casually walked by him and asked, "Hey Midoriya, how's your girlfriend doing?" He was startled out of writing something in his notebook, so he had answered without thinking. "Oh, she's fine now," he said with a quick smile, and then immediately felt his cheeks color. "I mean, wait. No, I." But his stammering protests fell on deaf ears as Ciro merely laughed and walked away. There had also been Wednesday's visit to the pool after school, during which a few of his classmates had begun floundering in the water. "Help me, I'm drowning." Kaminari had lamented dramatically. "Where's Midoriya? I need the kiss of life." He extended a grasping hand to the sky, as if waiting for a large bird to snatch him up. "Oh no, I am sinking," Kirishima had added. His acting skills were more reminiscent of something wooden than something made of rock. "Wherever is my manly and heroic savior?" "I'm not swimming with you guys anymore," Izuku had muttered darkly, climbing the ladder out of the pool and stalking away dripping wet. They'd called out apologies after him, but he wasn't in a very forgiving mood for once. Izuku had a reputation for being kind, non-confrontational, and frankly, easy to walk all over. The fact that people were teasing him was nothing. He was used to it. He'd been mocked and derided his whole life. But the fact that they were dragging Uraraka into it, fluttering their eyelashes at the two of them and winking and making Uraraka's face cloud over with uncertainty and confusion, was something he wasn't as willing to put up with. When Hagakure had giddily asked him at lunch Thursday when he first realized his feelings for Uraraka, which was a question that Izuku didn't even know how to properly answer, which feelings was he supposed to realize? There were a lot of feelings and some of them he wasn't quite sure he was willing to classify as realized. He finally lost his patience. Listen, you're all wrong, he declared, having clambered atop a table for emphasis. Ordinarily he wouldn't do something like this, but drastic times called for drastic measures. Uraraka herself had gone to the restroom, so he felt reasonably certain that talking about it now would be less risky. Class 2A's voices petered out as they offered their attention, and Izuku clenched his fists by his sides as he continued. I've had lifeguard training before. I would have done what I did for Uraraka-san for anyone. He glared around at them all as they stared, and nobody spoke for a moment. Even Iida, Ashido broke the silence. Of course, he answered immediately. That's very chivalrous of you, Midoriya-kun, his friend said graciously. However, I must insist that you get down from that table at once. Would you even do that for Bakugo? Some foolish person that sounded like Kaminari asked. Absolutely. Izuku shouted before the question was even finished, and then instantly recognized that he had made a grave error. Wait, no, he backpedaled desperately, waving his hands around. Maybe everyone except Deku. Kachan growled dangerously, cracking his knuckles. His face was twisted into a snarl. I'm not a total monster, so I'm going to give you 5 seconds head start before I start trying to kill you. Izuku gulped. Good call, he squeaked, and then booked it out of there at a speed that would make Iida proud. Lunch was better when enjoyed outside anyway. After a week of everyone acting like they knew Ochako's secret, she and Deku finally found a savior in the form of Suyuasui. Placing an oversized hand on Izuku's shoulder, she called everyone's attention with a, listen up, everybody, hero. As they spilled into the common area of the dorm after class let out Friday afternoon. Ochako herself hung back towards the rear of the group, curious about Sue's serious tone. I've been noticing lately that a lot of you have been teasing Midoriya-chan for what happened at the beach, the frog girl began. You should leave him alone. Ochako-chan was truly in danger, and he did whatever he could to save her. I don't think that's something we should ridicule him for. I thought you all were better than this, making someone feel bad for doing something heroic. Ochako tilted her head, confused. Why would anyone tease Deku for bringing her to shore? Through the gaps between her taller classmates, she could see the green-haired boy duck his head, hiding his face in apparent embarrassment. Curiously, everyone else seemed to be also hanging their heads. Sue had a special talent for getting everyone to behave and listen to reason. She was like a big sister to the entire class. We're sorry, Midoriya, Kaminari spoke up. We know you would have helped anyone if it came right down to it, not just her. Everyone else present murmured their apologies as well. We didn't mean to make you feel ashamed of doing a good thing, Mina agreed. It was just fun to tease you and Uraraka about it because of your super obvious crushes on each other. Izuku's head whipped up, and he blinked dumbly. Ochako, meanwhile, was frozen in place, Mina's words echoing over and over again in her head like the ringing of a bell. Super obvious. Super obvious. Each other. Zero smacked her arm. Ashido. He hissed. Don't just say it out in the open. R, said Deku with a gulp. Are super obvious what now? Juro sighed, massaging her forehead. Nice going, Mina. What? The pink girl burst out defensively, throwing her arms in the air. It's true. We all know it. R, murmured Izuku again. R what? Kirishima smacked Ashido's arm too. You broke Midoriya, you jerk. Ochako finally found her voice. Hold on. Everyone. She said, her voice coming out a high-pitched squeak. She could feel her face flushing, but she decided she needed some questions answered whether she looked like a tomato or not. She shouldered her way through the group, standing at the front of them. You've been teasing Deku. What are you talking about? Maybe if she asked them about that, everyone would conveniently forget what Mina had said. The same thing we've been talking about all week, silly. Toru said brightly. Her sleeves moved together as if she was clasping her hands in front of her chest. The super heroic and gallant way that Midoriya saved you when you were drowning. She sighed dreamily. Reviving you with a kiss. It was like something out of a fairy tale. Wait, what? Ochako squawked. When in the world had he revived her with a kiss? A quick glance at Deku revealed no explanation, since he was covering his face with both arms in a manner that was reminiscent of a vampire going out in the sunlight. Hold up, what happened? She didn't even remember, Zero said, and then shook his head. Harsh. Guess it wasn't too memorable, Midoriya. Sucks for you. As she stood before her classmates, flashes of sensation began to rise to the surface of Ochako's mind, emerging from the murk like the answer pyramid in a magic 8 ball. A blur of blue and white, shouting for help, sinking through cold darkness, being lifted up as everything went black, something soft against her mouth, terrified green eyes looking down at her as her own fluttered open. Bright sunlight blinding her, turning over sideways and coughing up water. Her knees felt weak. That, she held her red face between her hands. That wasn't a dream, she finished internally. Her thoughts whirled dizzyingly as her brain tried to reconcile what was memory and what was fantasy. Where was the overlap? Had her thoughts of him gently holding her cheek been a memory in disguise as well? Had everyone known about her first kiss before she did? Did that even count? Kaminari smacked Mina's arm this time. You broke Uraraka now, too. I didn't even say anything this time. Ashido protested. And stop hitting me. Deku's voice stammered, and Ochako accidentally locked eyes with him for a second, which somehow felt like someone wrapping a hand around her heart and squeezing. He went even redder, which was an incredible feat really, and shook his head as if to dislodge an inconvenient thought. I have to go, he proclaimed, and before anyone could protest, he had pushed through the group and run out of Heights Alliance. He ran away, Kirishima said, sounding disappointed. That's not very manly. I can't say I blame him, Kaminari remarked. That guy gets embarrassed when he sits with a girl, never mind being reminded that he kissed one. It wasn't really a kiss, though, Jiro reminded him. And like he said before, he would have done that for anyone that needed it. I don't know about that, Kaminari said in a sing-song voice. Ochako stared after where Izuku had disappeared, questions zooming through her head so fast it felt like they could give her whiplash. He saved me, even more than I realized, and he never wanted to take credit. Why has he been putting up with everyone giving him a hard time because of me? Why didn't he just tell me what happened? Does mouth to mouth count as a first kiss? Amid the quiet chatter of her classmates, Ochako had almost forgotten that Sue was standing at the front of them all, too. She jumped when her friend patted her back gently. You should talk to him, Ochako-chan, she advised quietly. Ochako bit her lip. She had been afraid someone would say something sensible like that. I don't know, she said hesitantly. Won't talking about it just make things even more embarrassing for him? Suyu shook her head. Even if it does, I think you should at least tell him thank you. She rested her index finger on her chin thoughtfully. After all, now you know what he's been dealing with all week. She groaned in an I know you're right and that's really annoying sometimes kind of way. Okay. Taking in a deep breath, she slapped her cheeks twice to psych herself up. I'm gonna talk to him. Good luck, hero. Her friend called after her as she turned and went off in pursuit of her rescuer. He looked up at her approach, but didn't move from his spot under the large tree he liked to train near. His head jerked in a quick nod of acknowledgement. Hi, she said awkwardly, looking at the ground instead of at him as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Can I sit? Izuku nodded, so she plopped herself down next to him. She could sense his shoulders stiffening at the proximity, so she scooted a few inches away. His legs were crossed, and hers stretched out flat in front of her as she rested back on the heels of her hands. If she wanted to, she could easily lay a reassuring hand on his knee. She felt that her friend might freak out if she did that, however. The grounds were quiet, save for the occasional bright twittering of birdsong, and the tree was a welcome source of shade from the harsh afternoon sunlight. So, said Ochako haltingly after a few moments of silence. You saved me with rescue breathing. His mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. He swallowed and tried again. Yeah, I guess. And ever since then, she continued, everybody's been teasing you about it. He nodded, his freckled cheeks lighting up in a blush. Bending her legs and scooting them towards herself, she buried her own face in her knees. I'm so sorry. You endured all that just because I'm a dummy who couldn't recognize a rip current. It's all right, he said quickly, holding up his hands and waving them like spastic jazz hands. I'm. I mean, it's not exactly anything new. I got teased a lot more than this in middle school. It was just like him to instantly try to reassure her, to try to alleviate any feelings of personal blame despite him being the one who needed the comfort. She withdrew her head and smiled at him. But this time it was my fault you got teased. His brows angled down, but the expression was more adorable than intimidating. No, it wasn't, he insisted. You were in trouble. I helped. It's as simple as that. She rested her chin on her knees. Simple. Huh, she repeated. They sat in silence for a while. Deku. She started. Yeah, would you really have done that for anyone? She swore she could actually see him start to sweat. I. I mean, I've been trained even before UA, and my mom made me attend a seminar, so. You're not answering my question, she pointed out. He clenched his fists in his lap. No, he finally got out. At least, I don't think so. I don't know. I didn't think about it when it happened. I just. His shoulders slumped, and his voice got even quieter than it had been before. Wanted to save you. Ochako wondered if that meant he really would have done it for anyone, since he generally wanted to save everyone. She hugged her knees to her chest. Was it strange? She mumbled into her skin. She wasn't sure if she really wanted the answer. Strange. Did you? Against her will, she felt her cheeks heating up. Did you dislike it? Deku scrunched up his face in thought. Well, I thought you were dying, so it wasn't exactly a fun time, he said bluntly. A laugh burst from her before she could stop it. Deku was always completely honest, for better or worse. It made her want to be more honest, too. Maybe more honest than she'd been in a long time. She scooted her feet out again, resting her arms on her knees and tilting her head at him a little. How about now? She asked. What do you mean? Well, do you think the idea is strange now? She laced her fingers together. As much as the others teased you all week, you never seemed to regret what you did. That's because I don't. His voice was as matter of fact as someone claiming that the sky was blue. I could never regret something like that. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Her own heartbeat picked up. Really? Of course. He sounded dismayed that she could ever think otherwise, his expression earnest. I don't want to lose you. Butterflies rapidly broke free from the cocoons she'd kept them in for too long, swirling in dizzying formations in her tummy. I don't want to lose you either, she admitted, not fighting the smile that spread across her face. Maybe smiles were better when you let them happen. Maybe a lot of things were better when you let them happen. Hey, Izuku. The name felt strange but pleasant on her tongue. His head whipped up in surprise. Yeah, rather than butterflies, it felt more like frogs hopping around in there now. It's kind of not fair that I'm the only one who doesn't remember it when you saved me. Oh, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. You didn't really miss much. I want to know how brave you were, she continued, resting her back against the tree and looking up into the branches. Glowing sunlight spilled down through pinhole-sized gaps between the dark leaves. It reminded her of stars. Pulling me out of the water like that. Knowing just what to do. The blush that seemed to spread all the way down to his neck was gratifying to her. Why, you're making it sound a lot better than it was, he mumbled. She shook her head. Deku, I might not remember, but I can almost picture it in my head. And oh boy, did I picture it, she added mentally. Multiple times. Because I thought it was a dream. I want to remember, though. She wished she could just say the words that were hiding behind these ones. Make me remember. Do it again. His face, when she glanced at it, seemed almost sad. His brows lifted and his mouth turned in a frown. I'm sorry, he said. She almost laughed again, but instead just smiled. What in the world for? He was rubbing the back of his neck and looking away again sheepishly. Well, that I can't help you remember. You can, though, she shouted in her head. You very easily can, you adorable idiot. Maybe if I drowned again, huh? She quipped. The horrified look on his face indicated that he hadn't picked up on her teasing tone. Please don't do that. Ordinarily she'd just drop it as a failed joke, but he was too cute. She couldn't resist messing with him a little. Why not? She said, playing at innocence. Surely you'd just rescue me again. Well, of course, but He bit his lip. It made her want to kiss it. I don't know if I could take seeing you like that again, to be honest. I was really scared, Uraraka. She remembered how terrified his eyes had looked when she blinked her own open on the beach, and instantly felt ashamed of herself for making light of it. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to scare you. Not knowing what else to do to reassure him, she leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. He froze up like he'd been hit with Todoroki's ice quirk, but he didn't move away. Hey, Deku, she said then, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. Her heart pounded. There was something else she wanted to say, and though she felt it was no longer wise to swallow important words, she still had no idea whether she'd have the guts to say them. What if I told you I was drowning right now? Huh? He said, perplexed. But, we're not in the water. I can't breathe, she told him, her fist closing around a handful of grass. My lungs feel like they're getting squeezed. My heart's shriveling up, and my vision's tunneling. Are you all right? He stammered, turning to grab her shoulders and give her a little shake. Should I take you to the nurse? She shook her head. I don't need a nurse. Ducking her head to hide the blush on her cheeks, she finally got it out. I just need you. He stared at her. She waited. Huh? He said. Ochako sighed, frustrated, and grabbed his shoulders in return. Izuku, I love you, but you are such a dummy sometimes. I'm telling you I'm drowning right now. Save me. Izuku squinted at her like she was a complicated math problem. But you're not. And then comprehension dawned across his face, his eyes widening to the size of saucers and his mouth dropping open. Quote dot dot dot. Oh, he squeaked, a flush coloring his face up to his ears. His fingers, still on her shoulders, started to tremble. She just glared at him, refusing to break eye contact. Running out of time here, she prompted him. I'll be dead in 3, 2. His lips were on hers, and it was a good thing she wasn't actually drowning, because all the air froze in her lungs and for a moment she forgot what it was to breathe. He was soft, so soft, and warm, and gentle, and everything. She leaned into the touch, lifting her chin and returning the light pressure. It was over far too soon. Her eyes fluttered open, and the green ones that met hers were terrified this time, too, as he dropped her shoulders like she'd burned him. What do you look so scared for? She giggled. I mean, I thought it was obvious, but I'm not actually dying. You're not mad? Deku asked, surprised. Ochako tilted her head. Why would I be mad? I. I didn't do the wrong. He shook his head and started over. Was that the right thing to do? She bumped her forehead into his. Yes, you always do the right thing. You actually, wanted me to. The voice that was spilling out was timid and halting, and he was so close that she could easily capture him in another kiss if she wanted to, and she did want to. I wanted you to, she confirmed. Oh, he said simply, his eyes flitting away from hers. Good. Me too. Was that his strange, Deku way to say that he'd wanted to kiss her, too? She smiled at him and reached over to take his hand. It was rough and gnarled beneath her fingers, not at all matching the softness of its owner. Thanks for saving me, she whispered. His hand curled around hers in response. I'd do it again in a heartbeat, he said once more. And he did. Where stories live. Discover now.